All right. Well, thanks everyone. Welcome to week two of Broadband Breakthrough. Thanks for being here. Um, and we'll get right into it because we have a pretty packed schedule and a group of great guests to speak and give you some information today. So we'll be speaking about the federal and state funding overview, as well as an example of community support priorities from a Broadband Breakthrough alum county. You'll be hearing from Shubika Agarwal, who is the assistant director for broadband data and geoanalysis at the Illinois Broadband Lab, and Shauna Tates, who is a policy analyst at the Illinois Office of Broadband. Then you'll hear from Molly Neighbor, who is a policy or economic development planner at R1 Planning, which serves a group of counties, Boone County being one of them, who participated in Broadband Breakthrough in 2024. And she'll give you an overview of what they developed through the program and are using to parse which ISPs they are considering to support in the upcoming Connect Illinois or the ongoing Connect Illinois Round 4 program. Finally, you'll hear from Richard Martin, who is the telecom general field representative for Illinois and Indiana. And he's going to tell you about the telecommunications grant and loan programs that USDA runs. But first, I'm going to give Nancy just a couple minutes to speak about the survey and maybe answer a couple questions. I know we kind of sped through that at the end of last week.
We did. It was, I like a challenge. So it was great to be able to give that overview to you all last week. And I apologize for one, just the brevity of it and maybe not having enough time for questions. But two, also, I lost my voice a little bit, I think, during the presentation or whatever, and that hasn't been completely resolved. But I wanted to just give a couple recap things. You are going to want to try to launch sooner than later. Having the time during the duration of the program is going to be important so that we can have some meetings about how your coverage is going once you launch those surveys. And then if we can get those closed out before the end of the program, there's enough time to talk and have those meaningful conversations about how the results tie in with what you're trying to have prepared and organized at by the end of the program. And so the couple just main three things that you're going to need to provide me: some introductory language, some sort of logo, and there's a few other pieces of information that you want to consider. You want to make sure that there's like a paper copy or some sort of way for people to sound in about their connectivity without having access to the internet, be able to still have their voice heard. And so, you know, you're talking about some particularly very rural areas or areas where there's not even great cell coverage, but you want to be able to let people sound in about their connectivity. And so having a place where they could access a paper survey, drop off a paper survey, call in and answer questions, and thinking about how your county wants to do that is going to be important. And so I'm going to give Reid a few bullet points of information about, you know, what I need from you to help you launch. And then I'm very available for your calls, your emails, etc., so that we can work together and make sure this is launching in your county in an appropriate and meaningful way, and that there is a good sort of surveying project network that you're able to build. And I'm happy to help you with the distribution planning, et cetera, for that. So I'm going to put my contact information in the chat. And I also want you, I know we've got a full list of speakers today, so I don't want to take a heck of a lot of time. If someone has a question, maybe we have time for like maybe one or two questions, but use the chat also to message me questions you might have. Got a question from Adam here. Is a call required? We plan to have paper copies in a dedicated broadband email box for the survey. That's perfect. We usually have at least you need to provide a number in that introductory text. You should provide a number that somebody could call if they have questions. Maybe they want to, maybe they want information of where they can get a paper copy, or maybe they, have a preference on how they want to fill out the survey. When someone doesn't have proper connectivity, I think the survey questions, there's like 17 or 18 questions. I guess that's still kind of a lot of questions, but it could be a 5-minute conversation. And so I know people don't have a lot of time. A lot of these positions you're in, especially for officials, you are doing this sort of in a semi pro bono way. But maybe thinking about people in your community or youth, high schoolers or something in your community who might want to have some experience doing surveying, community engagement, and that all, can look very, look well on them for the beginning of their careers, etc. So keep your mind open about how your communities might want to do this, and happy to talk. So I'm going to put my contact in the chat. Any other questions at this time? Very excited for the other speakers today. And thank you also for the counties who've sent me some logos and introductory texts already. You're well on your way to getting a launch, and we'll be having some one-on-one communications via email this week.
Okay, thanks, Nancy. And with that, we'll move on to start talking about the Illinois programs from Shabika and Shauna. So I'll turn it over to you all.
Hi, all. Thank you so much. Very exciting to be here. My name is Shauna Tates. As Reid mentioned, I'm a policy analyst for the Illinois Office of Broadband. And Shabika and I are excited to give some BEAD updates and demonstrate a tool that we have that broadband providers across the state are using for their BEAD applications. So, thanks, Shabika, for sharing your screen. So just as a quick recap, the Illinois Broadband team is made up of a couple of partners. So there's the Illinois Department of Office of Broadband through the Department of Commerce and Economic Opportunity, housed at the state, and then there's the Illinois Broadband Lab, housed out of the University of Illinois, who's working in partnership with Benton on the Broadband Breakthrough Program. We can go to the next slide, Shabika.
Oh, just a second, it's being super slow.
Always the way.
Yes.
Cool. So the things that we'll go through today are BEAD basics and updates, an overview of what these PAUs are, and then Shabika will demo this PAU selection tool and we can answer any questions. Next slide. Alrighty. BEAD updates. So starting from the foundation, just to establish shared understanding, BEAD stands for the Broadband Equity Access and Deployment Program. It was passed under the Infrastructure and Jobs Act in 2021. It dedicated $42.45 billion to build out broadband infrastructure across all 50 states and U.S. territories to locations that are currently considered un- or underserved. And I'll talk a little bit more about what un- and underserved mean in just a moment. But next slide. Okay, so the goals of BEAD. The state of Illinois was awarded a little over $1 billion to connect all of these un- or underserved locations in the state, with a goal of maximizing the use of end-to-end fiber. So prioritizing projects that would allow folks to have access to fiber internet at their home or business, prioritizing projects that are providing this access to un- or underserved locations and community anchor institutions, Wi-Fi for multi-dwelling units, and then other digital equity and inclusion priorities. We needed to run a subgrantee selection process. That's what we are in the middle of right now. Go over some of the details in that in just a moment. And there was a fourth goal of focus on improving broadband affordability. We know that access to the internet does not necessarily mean that you're able to afford to subscribe to a plan month to month. So prioritizing that affordability piece as well. Next goal or next slide, Shabika. Thank you. So this is a timeline of everything that's happened on BEAD up to this point. So the first four icons refer to a lot of the planning and preparation that has happened. But I would draw your eye to this diamond in the blue box that says we are here. So there's been a lot of preparation happening, and then we are today closing out the applications for the Wave 1 round of the BEAD grant. So these Wave 1 projects are all fiber projects, and there's a requirement that anyone who submits an application in this wave needs to include 10% hard to serve PAUs. That is to say, 10% of their application needs to have this designation as being hard to serve. And I'll talk a little bit more about what makes an area hard to serve in a moment. So at 5 p.m. today, this application window will close and we will go through a process of review, scoring, and then what's called deconfliction. Deconfliction is basically when multiple providers have said that they would like to receive funding to serve the same area. And we will look at those overlaps and figure out based on who is the highest scoring and a number of other factors, which provider will receive the funds for that area. So the goal is that we are not double funding any part of the state. Then we will open the Wave 2 round in spring of this year. The Wave 2 round is open for all reliable broadband service. So this could be other fiber projects or something like fixed wireless or, excuse me, cable or some combination of those technologies. And then we will go through the same scoring and deconfliction process. And then towards the end of the year, we'll have Wave 3, which is where we can use some alternative technologies like low Earth orbit satellite or unlicensed fixed wireless to make sure that every single location across the state is covered. So the goal is to really use all of the tools in our tool belt. And then towards the end of the year, we'll take all of the preliminary selected subgrantees and submit them in a final report to the National Telecommunications Information Administration, NTIA, which is the federal agency overseeing the program. So really exciting times. It's been quite busy over the past 4 weeks or so. Next slide, Shubika. Alrighty, so going over which locations in the state have service or don't have service and are therefore eligible for BEAD. So across the state, there are a little over 175,000 locations that have been determined as not receiving sufficient broadband access. So I'm about to hit you with some math. So there are total 4.2 million broadband serviceable locations, and a BSL is a home or a business that is eligible to receive broadband service. 107,000, excuse me, of those are considered unserved. These are the pink dots that you can see in the map. That's about 3% of the total number of locations across the state. And those are locations that have either no access or access to plans that are quite slow underneath this 25 megabits per second over 3 megabits per second speed. The shorthand way would be to say 25 over 3. The blue dots are about 1% of the state. It's 65,000 locations that do have broadband access that is over that 25/3 speed, but under the federal minimum of 100 over 20. And so we're working to serve both the pink and the blue dots through BEAD. And then finally, those make up 172,000 of the eligible BSLs. And the green dots across the state are the 4 million places that are already served with internet access over 120. And then finally, if you're doing the math, we're about 3,300 short of the 175,000. So the remainder is community institutions. So these are community gathering places that would require internet access or broadband access, like a rec center, a library, a school, etc. Needed to be organized into something that was going to be chunked out, and those are called project area units. Next slide, Shubika. So definition, project area units are these collections of BSLs, so homes and businesses, and community anchor institutions, and they all are grouped together so that providers who are participating in the application process are able to say, these are the PAUs or the areas that we are looking to receive funding for. The image on the right-hand side of the screen, you'll see that there is a group of orange or pink dots Thank you, Shubika. Those are all of the individual locations. And because they're all the same color, that indicates that they're all a part of the same project area unit. So a provider, when they're looking at this map that we will show you, would say that they want to serve this entire PAU, and those PAUs cannot be broken up. So they cannot say that they would just like to serve the locations above the numbers in this image. For example, they have to serve everything that is this orangey-pink dot. The hexagons that you see are just a visual tool, so that you're not looking at a bunch of colors and unable to process which ones go with which. So the hexagons are just a way to say, yes, these are all of the locations within this PAU. PAUs don't overlap necessarily. They're meant to be kind of grid-like across the state, and then they collectively cover every single eligible location. Okay, I think we can go to the next slide, Shivika. All right, so we have BSLs, which are the locations. Those all get grouped into PAUs, and then when a provider is applying, they select a number of PAUs, and that makes up their project area. That's generally how folks are approaching their application for BEAD. Applicants can pick any number of PAUs. They can't break them down any further than the groupings that you saw on the map. And then what a project area is not, it's not a guarantee that an applicant will receive funding for any or all of their proposed project area. And in a second, we'll talk a little bit about how some of those things might get broken up. A must-include PAU is an area that a provider has identified as being critical to their project in order for it to be viable. So they're able to say, we need this PAU in order for this project to work. But then during that deconfliction process that I mentioned, where we're looking to see if there are multiple providers bidding on the same PAU, there's a chance that they might lose that must include PAU because there's a higher scoring application, for example. If they do end up losing that must include PAU, they can withdraw their application, or they can decide to kind of rescope things and serve some number of the other PAUs that they would still be eligible for. And then must include PAUs aren't a requirement that they have to withdraw their application. Like I said, they do have the opportunity to rescope. Finally, those hard to serve PAUs. So as a reminder, folks who are applying or providers who are applying in this round are required to include at least 10% of these hard to serve PAUs. And these are areas that have been determined to be hard to serve based on a few criteria. So it could be that they had a high share of unserved BSLs that have little to no access already. They have a high share of locations, BSLs, that haven't had any provider interest in any past grant rounds or federal grants. Locations that are in a persistent poverty county, so 20% or more of the population living in poverty, or is a high cost area, which could be due to different factors like geography. But a hard to serve PAU isn't a comprehensive list of all of the PAUs that could be hard to serve. Providers can tell you that there's a number of reasons that something might be difficult for them to serve that fall outside of these bounds. Alrighty, we're getting through the definitions, and then Shubik will be able to show you a tool that makes this feel more real. The reference cost, which you will also see on this tool, is an estimate for how much money it would be estimated is required to build out broadband service to this PAU. The minimum cost is $1,000. The maximum reference cost for PAU is generally around $3,000. You'll see on the screen the exact amount. This was based on a cost quest associate net present value estimate. So again, it's an estimate. And then this is important for the scoring. So we have the reference cost. So if a provider is saying, it would cost me $3 million to serve this area, and the reference cost is $5 million, that's our estimate, then that will affect how their application is scored. Reference costs are not an exact number or an estimate of the total cost. So there are a number of factors that providers have to take into account when thinking about how to plan and deploy and maintain fiber or broadband. So it's an estimate, and it's not a commitment by the state of Illinois to fund at that amount. Finally, high cost area. So this is an area that NTIA has determined where NTIA has determined that building out broadband is above average. In Illinois, there are six census block groups that qualify as high cost. And then there's some exemptions for these areas in the application process. For example, they'll be exempt from the 25% match that is required as a part of the other, required as a part of the speed process. High cost areas are not inclusive of all areas that might be high cost. This is an NTIA designation. Ooh. Alrighty. So there are there is a tool called the Project Area Selection Tool that Shubika will demo now that will make a lot of those pieces I just went over probably give a face to the name, let's say. So Shubika, I'll pass to you.
Awesome. Thanks, Shauna. So I'm gonna stop sharing this and bring my map on here so that we can see. Oops. Oh, I have a bunch of screens going on. We'll also drop a link to this in the chat, and you'll have access to the slides so that you're able to access this in the future as well. But I think also want to point you to the sub-grantee selection process landing page, which has all of the information that's going to be super helpful for you as you prepare to apply for this particular opportunity, the NOFO document, the application guidebook that walks through all of the requirements and the application forms. And then there's also a link to the project area selection tool right here. This is also important because we've set it up so that the project area template that has to be submitted as part of the project form requires input from this map here so that we're receiving it in a standardized format, and we'll see what that looks like. So when we enter the map, because this is wave one, information pertaining to wave one currently stays on this. We have the 10% hard to serve requirement and the priority broadband projects, meaning for this round, we will be prioritizing the end-to-end fiber projects, as Shauna mentioned. And then there's also quick instructions on here in case, you just want to get started with how to use the tool. So when you enter, because it's the entire state, you're not going to see anything other than the state boundary, and all of these layers here are grayed out. As you start to zoom into the map, that is when you'll start to see some of these are active layers now, and the data starts to show up as different layers on here. So for the sake of example, and we'll talk about the different layers and everything when we zoom into a specific area. So for example, I'm going to zoom into Lake County for now. So in the search bar, you can basically search by a specific address, a city, a county, and it is going to take you, or a zip code also. So whatever is available that can be entered in there. It's going to take a while, take you to the location that you've selected. Let's see. Okay, taking a look. Wow, that took me to the lake. So just move around and actually get to the area that you're interested in. So I wanted to look at Lake County, and we'll start to see some of the PAUs that Shauna mentioned. So that is basically all of the cluster of hex aids, which are used as a visual aid to group different eligible locations within a PAU. So as Shauna mentioned, the idea of using the hexagons is just a visual aid so that we don't have random polygons showing you which of these similar colored locations fall within the same PAU. So that's the PAU aggregate areas. Sometimes that might get confusing. So you could just turn this off. And then when you see locations around, like with the same colors, all of these reds, that's one PAU. All of these oranges is one. And then similarly other colors. But this can definitely help bring some of this together for you. You will also see some shared hexagons here. So all of these hexes that are hatched. What that means is in these hexes, so if I zoom into this specific one here, we're seeing that this has a yellow dot as well as an orange dot. So this is a hex that is shared between two PAUs, PAU 417.097, one, so this, which is highlighted in yellow, and this, which I'm trying to click. Yes. So it got lit up with both of these PAUs. So that's what shared hexes mean. So they're shared between two different PAUs. And this is a different one. For some reason it's frozen. And then just so you know, there's a difference between community anchor institutions. They show up as triangles, and the eligible BSLs show up as circles. So when you click on a PAU, you'll be able to see some of the information that's helpful. For planning purposes, the number of unserved and underserved locations within the PAU, how many eligible CAIs, so that's what's the total number of locations that are eligible for BEAD funding in this PAU, and the reference cost, as Shana mentioned. So this is basically the sum of the estimate for these individual locations that fall within the PAU. And the NOFO has a rubric for how the application is going to be scored on based on where they have quoted their budget with reference to the reference cost. So that is one of the bigger determinant of scores in these applications. And then we also have a layer for ineligible locations. So per BEAD requirements and how we have laid out our NOFO, a provider can include at least or like a maximum of 20% served locations as part of their application. They'll have to share why it is super important for them to include those. Yeah, just a lot of layers showing up. So my systems not taking that really well, I guess. And so that's a visual aid for you to see where those locations fall on the map and can help with planning purposes. And there is a section in the application that requires the applicant to then also describe why it is super important for them to include that. Now going on to actually, creating your project area for the submission. So you can individually select these PAUs that you might be interested in, and those then turn green. Or you can use the lasso tool to basically select a cluster of PAUs that are of interest. So you can make that selection. And this would be in partnership with the provider. And if there are examples where we see those shared hexagons, it's going to ask me whether I want to include all of the PAUs that are part of those shared hexagon situations, or do I want to include just specific ones? For this demonstration, I'll just say add all of them to my PAUs. And that is when we see that all of these have now turned green. So a few statistics that would now be helpful. The PAUs tab essentially has, so all of the ones in blue are what we have selected, and the ones that are in white are still in my view here on the map, but I've not selected those. So this can be helpful to get a sense of what exactly is visible on the map and what I have selected as part of my PAUs. And you can certainly add more from in here, and that's going to bring that up as green on the map as well. This can be super helpful just to see your selection, go through it, and also include any must include or must have PAUs. So where the ISP would let us know that, these are important for me to build out. And if these are applied for by another applicant, I would just want to also reconsider my submission. So this is a way for us to let them know the must-have PAUs, selecting these stars. And some really helpful statistics here. So specifically for round 1, because there was at least 10% hard to serve. So this particular tab here on PAUs gives us a sense of how many regular PAUs versus how many hard to serve PAUs were selected. The hard to serve PAUs, as you've seen, are basically highlighted in the dotted red lines on the map. So you'll get a summary here with this selection. We have 8.8% of those. The total number of locations that are part of this selection, so that's the eligible, uncertain, underserved locations, and the number of community anchor institutions that fall within these PAUs. So a total of 1,993 locations. And then we also have the reference cost and for the entire project area, and how it's going to be scored is also on the project level and not on the PAU level. So all of this, I can make revisions to this, get a sense of, yeah, I'm comfortable with all of the PAUs that I've selected, and I want to include these as part of my application. So that is when you can save this as a CSV using this icon. And that's going to be saved where you want to save that on your system. And in terms of next steps, it's going to be used as an input in one of the project area templates that we have for the application. You can also bring in from CSV. So if I select that, so I go to my quick access. This is the one that I recently, so wait, it's going to make more sense if I just cancel my selection, which I can do by selecting delete all PAUs. So maybe you just want to look at it and now you want a different selection. So you can say delete all of my PAUs. And I can refresh the map. So all of that goes away. And if I'm starting afresh from a list that I previously generated from this tool, I'm going to say open PAUs from CSV. Select that file that was generated, and that brings in all of these PAUs for me. And it will still also retain any must includes that I might have. So however I exported the data, it's going to show up that way here. And I would zoom into the map to see where exactly they are. And I can continue to maybe build on this, add or remove PAUs. So again, if it's like a bigger project area that you're working on, you don't have to look at it all just in like one sitting. You can work on it, download and export a CSV, and maybe bring it in at a later point and continue to revise it until you feel comfortable with the selection that you've made. You can also visualize this data in a table format right here on the PAU tool. So not entirely sure if this helps without a visual, but it's still available in a table format if that's helpful to see. And that's going to be at the location level for each of these PAUs. We also recently added a feature to search by PAU ID. So this is going to be like one PAU ID that you can search by. If you looked at the map previously and you have a PAU ID that you're interested in, I don't have one off the top of my head. So I'm just going to copy and paste this example. And then I'm just going to zoom out and close this so that I never saw this. Then I would select search by PAU ID and put in the PAU ID that I'm interested in and hit the search button. So that's then going to zoom into the PAU ID that I selected. It has this different kind of boundary that shows that this is my selection. Again, if I click on it, I can see all of the relevant information for this in terms of BSL, CAIs, and reference costs. And if I want to, I can add that to my PAUs. So realizing that there are also ISPs who look at these layers on their own mapping platform, and then because they have to use this tool to generate an expo that is used as input for the application materials, they could just enter the PAU IDs in here and continue to add them to their selection to get to the final export. So that's why we thought it might be helpful to add this feature to the map as well. That's pretty much all of the features here. Today being the last day of wave 1, when you look at the map for wave 2, there's going to be some additional layers on here in terms of preliminarily awarded areas for wave 1. So those are going to be grayed out, and then you'll have a sense that these are all of the locations and areas that are now available for wave 2 and wave 3. And then we are also working on a list of no bead locations, meaning we are collecting feedback from ISPs, or maybe the deadline for that has passed, but we're reviewing information where providers are letting us know if they have expanded their networks to certain areas since we concluded the challenge process previously. So they're telling us that we've already built to these locations, so please exclude them as part of the BEAD program because there's service existing at these. So there is guidance again on the sub-grantee selection process page on what that looked like. So it's the serviceability update submission guidance, if you want to look at what that means. And then we'll also be adding information on, because this version of the map uses Fabric version 3, and the Fabric is all of the BSLs in the state, again, based on cost-quest modeling. That is not the latest. The latest is version 6. So we're going to compare the two and just see locations that might have been excluded between these versions because, again, the Fabric is continuously being revised. So there might be instances where a lot of farm structures, silos, or like barns were showing up as broadband serviceable locations that don't really need direct access to internet. So we're going to identify those and also mark those as no bead locations so that we have a better sense of all of the actual broadband serviceable locations that need to be connected to the internet. And really quickly, we have a couple of, all of these instructions are also attached as screenshots in the slides that we'll be sending out. So you'll have access to the instructions later on as well. Just wanted to share a few contact information slides as well. There's the grant help desk at DCEO with information on here. And then we also have our broadband email where we accept any queries that you might have and we try and promptly respond to those. We've also included links to other resources that might be helpful for preparation for Connect Illinois Round 3. So the NOFO, the sub-grantee landing page that I had mentioned, and we also have a lot of webinar materials and FAQs on there that'll be helpful to look at, and also the NOFO as I mentioned. Again, your ways of staying informed and engaged would be signing up for updates using our partner intake form and subscribing to the newsletter as well. So with that, I'm going to stop sharing. Thank you. And I know, Reid, if we have time for questions now, or we can also take them towards the end.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks, should be good. Thanks, Shauna. Yeah, I think maybe we can go to Molly first and then address questions at the end. After Richard speaks, we can have an open discussion if there's time. I think it's likely we'll go over today. Like we said last week, the first couple weeks of this program, a lot of content happens. So we appreciate folks sticking with us. I don't think we'll go the full 90 today, but I would anticipate going a little bit past 10. So if people have to jump, we completely understand, and the recording is obviously there for you. And if you have questions that you aren't able to ask here, all the contact information will be included in the follow-up email and the slides, and obviously use the chat as well. So thank you to Shauna and Shabika again. Yeah, so we'll move to Molly Neighbor from Boone County and our own planning to try and give some context for you just saw the map and exactly how the Connect Illinois Round 4 process grant selection is sort of, you get into that process. And now you can see sort of a example of how a county that has gone through this program in the last year is using their the information that they got in the program and, any obviously prior information and planning experience they had to insert themselves into the grantee selection process and make their voice heard. So thanks for being here, Molly, and take it away.
Thanks, Reid. Are you seeing my screen all right?
We are, thanks.
Okay, perfect. All right, good morning, everyone. As Reid mentioned, my name is Molly Neighbor. I work on the Economic Development team at Region 1 Planning Council. I wear a few different hats at R1, but one of my main roles is leading broadband planning for the Northern State Line region, which includes Boone, Ogle, Stevenson, and Winnebago counties. This role is what actually put me into Broadband Breakthrough on behalf of Boone County in the last cohort for last year. So I just wanted to start by giving a quick overview of Boone County's previous broadband planning history. So back in 2022, Boone County launched Broadband for All, which was a survey and a planning exercise to better understand internet access gaps, especially after COVID-19. A lot of our school districts had to deploy like personal Wi-Fi devices for students and other things like that. And so a survey was launched then. And then in 2023, a second survey was launched, coined Boone County Broadband Survey, to build on that work. And then most recently in 2024, we were part of the Broadband Breakthrough Cohort, which launched a third survey, which really just affirmed what a lot of our community stakeholders were already thinking, that access, affordability, and reliability were our three main concerns across Boone County. So this last survey was pushed out with the help of a lot of community stakeholders in Boone County, but specifically with the schools, the Farm Bureau, and then the Boone County government as well. The map on the right shows our results that came from our survey that Nancy was just talking about, everybody launching here in a few weeks, but that's not the main focus of today, so just wanted to provide that for some context. So then after collecting our data as a part of our survey, the Boone County stakeholders, again, just kind of affirmed what they were already thinking, that affordability, speed, reliability were the biggest concerns. Out of our responses, more than half, brought up these concerns in their result. And so since this was our third survey where we've gotten the same things, we wanted to figure out a framework to turn this into actionable results. How are we going to apply this survey into actually getting infrastructure in the ground that is aligned with local community priority? So then when we started outlining our broadband priorities, it led us to kind of create this community support matrix. So our three focus areas of this matrix were speed, affordability, and support. Speed kind of gets at that access piece. So we wanted everybody to have fiber. Ideally, that was what the community was pretty set on, but we didn't want to exclude any other type of connection, such as satellite, based on just the fact that we liked fiber. So we decided to put it out there as a speed-based approach. So the minimum speed that we would have liked to have been implemented when infrastructure was being deployed was 300 by 30 megabit per second. And then within 3 years of that infrastructure being deployed, we wanted that to increase to 500 by 50 megabit per second. And then within 5 years, we wanted to see 1,000 by 200 megabit per second. This really just makes sure that we have scalable technology going into the ground or in satellite or something like that to keep up with the changing technology, since it's evolving so quickly. The next category that we were focused on was affordability. So again, this was based on our survey results. So we, as part of our survey, asked what cost households would be comfortable paying for broadband connectivity. And so we felt that $55 a month was good for like the mid-tier option that a household would be paying. There are obviously top of the line ones that could cost a little bit more, or maybe slower speeds that could cost a little bit less. So we thought that 55 was a good point to put out there. And then for contracts, we didn't want to see any increases exceed 5% for the first 5 years. We didn't want an introductory rate that would jump a lot after the first contract was out, just based on the feedback that we were receiving from our community members in Boone County. So then the other piece of contracts that we wanted to incorporate into our matrix was that we didn't want the service contracts to be greater than 6 months. We wanted our residents to have flexibility. Financial situations change often, and maybe there's a new provider in the area. And so we wanted to provide that kind of flexibility in what we would support as a county. So then the last piece of our community support priorities that we wanted to address was that support. And this really gets at that reliability piece that we've been hearing over the last few surveys. And so we wanted to see a service and repair operation within 45 miles of the coverage area. And so that's just if, an outage does occur, which is bound to happen, we want to make sure that there's going to be a solution to the problem within basically an hour drive. We also wanted to see a call center for customer concerns so that customers can call and get answers on billing or on technology or whatever they need, that they feel supported. And then we want to also see a proration of the bill if there was an outage over 24 hours to make sure that, customers are getting what they're actually paying for. So this matrix that we created was ultimately just created to set a clear set of expectations when engaging with internet service providers and reviewing broadband proposals. So far, how we've used this since being done with the Broadband Breakthrough Program, we've gotten approached a lot for letters of support through the Connect Illinois Run for Wave 1 that Shubika and Shauna were talking about. And there will continue to be waves, Wave 2, maybe a Wave 3. And so this was essentially just our starting point to ensure that those letters of support are more than just a formality, that we understand what our community priorities are, and we want those to be reflected in the applications that are going to the state. So basically, when an ISP requested one, we either send them this or more informally ask them to describe how they are meeting our requirements or how they plan to meet our requirements. And it's kind of just a point for negotiation. We can't necessarily require that these are what the guidelines that the ISPs follow, but it's a way to make sure that what we want is being thought about by the ISPs, and they're most often willing to adapt their plans or adapt what they're going to offer based on those conversations, especially to get the support of the community, given all of the federal and state funding that's coming in. So we're continuing to do broadband planning on a regional basis. And so as we do more surveys, we'll continue to update what this matrix looks like. So then, if maybe rates start to change based on how incomes are, we want to make sure that it reflects the most accurate data that we have. So yeah, that's kind of what we came up with through our broadband breakthrough participation in the last cohort. It's been a super useful tool for our government partners that R1 partners with, for us as we go into conversations with ISPs. And yeah, happy to take any questions or wait. You can always reach out to me with any questions as well.
Thank you so much, Molly. Really great job. And I think that's the exact kind of outcome that, we are so proud of when a county does something like that and puts it to use, like you said. And I've heard a couple of anecdotes from the outreach that ISPs have been doing in Boone, and glad that it's being put to use. So just grateful for that presentation, and well done. Oh, and you have a question from, I think, Key in Pike County.
Yeah, so the primary decision makers, it was school districts were a big proponent. They felt like they had a good handle on what students needed and what households needed. And so the IT department was able to give us those framework for the speeds and what they've been hearing, since they are the ones who've been pushing the surveys the most over the past couple of years. Otherwise, our economic development organization was helpful in understanding that as well. And so between them, us as R1, understanding what the BEAD process is going to look like, and then also our county government and Farm Bureau being able to push out the survey. That's kind of what led us to make those decisions in the matrix.
Great. Well, if there are other questions, continue to put them in the chat or follow up afterwards, but want to move on to Richard and be respectful of his time. I know we're getting close to the end, so bear with us, folks, and thanks for participating so far. So I'm going to pull up Richard's slides here. Everyone see those?
Okay. Yeah, I can see it. I can see it just fine. Thank you.
Might need to swap. Is that better or is that worse?
Oh, that's better, actually.
That's better. There we go.
Yeah.
All right. Go ahead, Richard. Thanks for being here.
Oh, no, thank you, Reid. I really appreciate the opportunity to speak for this group, and thanks for the Benton Institute for putting this on. I'm going to spend a few minutes and try to make it quick. I know time is probably of the essence here, so I'll try to get through this as quickly as I can. Just basically providing some information about how the USDA offers different programs for your telecommunications needs. So, next slide, please. So basically, I'm a general field representative, and I know the government loves to give us really high profile names, but general field representative basically offers we're offered program support and project administration. We help with application application origination. Serve your funding through project completion, and just basically overall oversight of your award completion and compliance. So we provide outreach and assistance as needed for potential projects and applicants. And again, this is my contact information, so feel free to reach out to me at any time. Next slide, please. So basically, rural development includes 3 agencies with unique programs and objectives. Rural Utility Services is the agency that I work with, and I won't go into the others, but basically, involved in Rural Utility Services is the electric and telecommunications programs, which are administered by the national office. So I work with the telecommunications program. Next slide, please. And just a little bit of history. 1935, the Rural Electrification Administration created, to begin providing financing to promote rural electrification. 1949, they received authority to finance telephone services in rural communities. 1995, evolving from that, RUS required all financed telecommunications networks to have the capacity to deliver broadband. And from 2010 to the present, we've approved over $11 billion in loans and grants to build out broadband infrastructure in the rural communities. So, and expand distance learning and telemedicine as well. So, next slide, please. So funding for rural broadband, we basically have several programs. We have a traditional infrastructure program, which really isn't getting, it hasn't gotten much attention of late because, basically the telephone is an outdated service, but involved in the infrastructure program, there's still some work to be done. So we also offer a rural broadband program, which is currently stagnant right now. It's not being, we don't have any offerings through that. We do have Community Connect grant program, Reconnect program, broadband technical assistance, and actually distance learning and telemedicine as well, which we'll get into in a later slide. So next slide, please. So let's talk about the infrastructure program real quickly. Next slide, please. So the purpose is to provide loan and grant funding to expand broadband networks, primarily serving rural residents. Eligible entities, state and local governments, tribal entities, nonprofits, for-profits, LLCs, partnerships, local co-ops, that type of thing. So based on the regulation and funding announcements, financially and technically, feasible, meets the non-duplication requirements for eligible projects. In the application periods, for the infrastructure program, applications are accepted annual or all year round. Basically, there is no release of funding announcements for that. We get a allocation each year for these funds, and so the applications can be made at any time. Next slide, please. So just kind of give some high profile numbers here. Basically, you can see that the loans that have been given out on the right hand side have kind of dwindled over the years. In fiscal year 2024, we didn't actually have any loans go through, I don't believe. And we don't have a whole lot available for funding in the traditional infrastructure this year. But $77 million, it would take care of a number of loans though at the same time. So the applications are made through the intake system through Salesforce. Again, they are accepted year round, and there are no funding thresholds right now. So it primarily benefits communities less than 5,000 residents. So next slide, please. Standard loan terms are 2-year principal deferrals, interest rates at the cost of money. Loan maturity is the life of the facilities finance plus 3 years. And we can assist and help review your loan applications before submission. With the interest rate being at the cost of money, that's kind of helped to squash, I guess, a lot of the applications that might have come through over the last several years, as interest rates have, the last couple of years, I guess, as interest rates have increased, we've seen less and less activity there. But actually, we are starting to see some increased interest in this program as the Reconnect program has apparently kind of met its end, and through rounds 5, I guess, of the Reconnect program, we're done with that program, and so we're looking for other opportunities to help rural America. So, next slide, please. So the Community Connect program, next slide. Basically, let's move on to the next slide, please. The Community Connect program, basically, it helps for areas with populations less than 20,000. The funding threshold is $100,000 to $5 million, and there is a matching requirement. It requires that the broadband service in the area be less than 10.1, and it does require a build-out speed of 100 over 20. The applications are made through the intake system through Salesforce, and they're currently being the application window is currently open right now. It opened actually this past week on February 20th, and it will be remain open until April 21st. Typically, what happens with this program, the awarded entity is required to put in a community center that anybody can go to at any time. Typically, like a hut or maybe in a library or something like that, and they'll build that out while they're building out the infrastructure of the program. That facility is required to be open for 2 years. It's a pretty popular program. We had in fiscal year 2023, we had 57 applications received for $188 million. We only had $66 million available. So basically almost 3 times the amount that we had available was applied for. We did approve 19 awards, totaling that $66 million. And again, the window is currently open until April 21st. Next slide, please. So this kind of gives a little bit of an idea of some of the particulars of it. Again, the minimum grant of $100,000, max grant of 5 million. Speed increase was made to 100/20. You can see some of the awards that were made nationwide, I guess, over to the far right. This is a copy of the screen that we get from the Rural Development website on the Community Connect grant. It shows the funding opportunity announcement where you can click on that, program overview, fact sheet, and so forth. And in the application intake system, you just click on these on each applicable box wherever you are in the process to get the information that you're looking for. Next slide, please. So distance learning and telemedicine. Next slide, please. This is a very popular program, and actually it's very popular in the state of Illinois. We had 2 years ago, I believe we had 12 or 13 awards that went out to different school systems and hospital organizations that they're providing services, whether it be telemedicine or distance learning to rural communities, and really is a great little program. Distance learning is the interactive delivery. So the interactive part is very important piece of the equation. So it has to be both sides of the equation, whether it's the instructors and the students on the other end. But delivery of the curriculum via telecommunications and promotes the connection of students and teachers at remote sites. Provides educational programs, instruction, and information originating in one area, whether it's rural or not, to students and teachers who are located in rural areas, or connect teachers and students located in one rural area with teachers and students who are located in different rural areas. Telemedicine is, again, a real-time interactive telecommunications link to an end user from the medical professionals. This helps to cut down on travel time for patients. Helps them, give them services that they wouldn't normally get in the rural communities and their physicians' offices or hospitals. So this is again a great service that we're providing here, and it's very popular. So next slide, please. Just an example of some of the statistics. Again, this is you actually submit your application through the grants.gov website. It does have a funding threshold of $50,000 to $1 million. 15% is a grant, is the requested grant amount for matching, and you must have a hub and then end user sites. It is for equipment only. It's not for traditional expenses. It doesn't cover the cost of labor or teachers or anything like that, but it does cover the cost of the equipment itself. The application currently is open for looks like about another week, so until March the 6th. And you can see in fiscal year 2024, we had 321 applications received for $245 million. We only had $72 million that were available to give out. So again, very popular, very sought after funds. We were able to make 108 grants, totaling $72 million for that. And again, currently applications are being accepted. Not sure about the amount that is available due to budget uncertainties, but if you're interested, please get your applications in, and it will be certainly considered. So next slide, please. So the e-connectivity program, the Reconnect, that is our kind of our bread and butter. What we have really been spending a lot of time, the majority of our time in the last few years on. Next slide, please. It is a loan and grant program. provides loans, grants, and loan grant combinations to bring high-speed internet to rural areas that lack sufficient access to broadband. So these funds can be used to fund the cost of construction, improvement, or acquisition of facilities and equipment needed to provide the broadband service. The FOAs, well, actually, since it's now closed, that's really not a relevant point. So next slide, please. Does have a 3-year principal and interest deferment on the loan funds. It is a 5-year construction period, so we're steadfast on that construction period. It does need to be completed within 5 years. Applications require annual unqualified and comparative audits for eligibility, and that reporting has to be maintained throughout the life of the grant. The funding opportunity contains eligibility scoring and application requirements for funding window. Again, we're not funding anything at this point. So next slide, please. You can see we had 5 rounds. And again, you can see where we had the requested funding on the left side and then the amounts that were actually awarded on the right-hand side. And you can see just the stark differences between what we had available and what was actually requested, especially round 3 and round 5 were almost 300% more than that was awarded, or 300% more that was requested than what was actually awarded. So again, very popular, and we're working very hard to build out the broadband infrastructure in the rural communities. Next slide, please. So this kind of gives you an update or an idea of where the monies went in round 5. You can see Illinois did receive about $39 million in round 5 that was requested. But actually, I don't believe was actually any. Well, no, that's not true. There were a couple of awards that were made in the state of Illinois that I'm not dealing with myself. There's another general field representative that's handling those at this time. So I do apologize for that. But next slide, please. So the Broadband Technical Assistance Program, this is a grant program. Next slide. And it does for technical assistance providers. This is for entities that support broadband efforts by delivering expertise and assistance. And for the recipients, these are entities that are seeking out expertise and assistance to further their broadband efforts. Right now, the window is closed for these applications. They're not being taken at this time. You can see anybody that can apply on the right-hand side there. Basically, the minimum award was for technical assistance recipients. The minimum award was $50,000, and the maximum award was $500,000. For the providers, minimum award was $100,000 with a maximum of $1 million, and this was during the fiscal year 2024 numbers. But again, right now applications are not being taken, but they may the window may open up again in the near future. So we'll just have to wait and see what the administration has to say about that. Next slide, please. So just some historical numbers for the state of Illinois. Next slide, please. You can see where the infrastructure program traditionally has given out over $153 million since 2010. But the Reconnect is actually now has exceeded that in 210, almost 211 million. In funds that have been allocated to that program. Distance learning and telemedicine, 18.2, Community Connect 7, and Broadband Initiatives program, which was previous program from the Obama administration that was right at 10 million as well. So about $400 million has been allocated, maybe a little bit more than that at this point, but to the state of Illinois. So you can see that we are actively involved in the state of Illinois and in the broadband infrastructure build out, and wanting to make sure that the citizens of Illinois are taken care of in that regard. So next slide, please. So we've got some resources here. You can click on any of these links to access the information that's applicable there. Next slide. And we also have some other available resources as well. So everything from the general field representatives and state offices to the Build America, Buy America Acts, Illinois Broadband Lab. We've got a lot of different resources here that are available. So in Reid, if I'm not mistaken, these slides will be made available to each of the participants.
Yep. Yeah, that's
okay,
right.
Great. Next slide, please. So that concludes my presentation. I hope that I haven't taken too much time, and I appreciate the opportunity to speak on behalf of USDA. And if anybody has any questions, I'm happy to answer them at this time.
Thank you so much, Richard. And I always, every time that you present, really appreciate seeing the summary statistics for Illinois and those numbers, steadily going up. So it's good to see, and I think especially the Community Connect grant and the distance learning and telemedicine programs are just great right now, where like Reconnect is in a phase where BEAD is the focal point for building infrastructure to residential and business addresses. So it's great to have those other programs that solve different and other aspects of the broadband gaps in rural America. So
exactly,
we'll definitely include those programs in the follow-up and encourage, though those application windows are closing or in the next week for telemedicine, and a couple months left for Community Connect, but
exactly,
encourage folks to look at those resources.
Yes, sir.
Any questions as we're wrapping up here for any of our speakers that are still on? We're hearing none. Thanks everyone so much. Just a couple notes from me. I meant to mention before Molly spoke that next week, Robbie Macbeth from the Illinois Broadband Lab will speak more about the community support mechanisms of Connect Illinois Round 4. So you'll get a chance to understand exactly how you can use a matrix like the one that Boone County has developed to influence the broadband grant selection process. So talking about how to form a letter of support, submit it alongside an ISP's application, and exactly how much points will be awarded for that letter of support and any other forms of community support. I think other than that, that'll be it for today. Please keep in contact with Nancy about launching your community survey. And you'll receive all of the information from today's webinar in a follow-up email later today or tomorrow morning. Thank you so much, everyone. Thank you to the speakers.
See y'all.